Good evening, everyone. At the outset, uh, organizers for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on this very important reform which is taking place. And one hopes that if handled correctly, it will end up making India self-reliant the way it has done to a host of countries who have managed it uh, uh, with a firm strategic direction. For example, take the case of Israel. In 19 after the Yom Kippur War, possibly we were both in the same condition. We were using similar weapon systems, the Centurion tank and things like that. And see what has happened to them over the past 40 years. And where are we? Now, I have been asked to talk about the restructuring and fulfilling of India's long-term defense software and hardware demands. I have a little advantage in the sense that I have been on the other side, seeing the production of the same equipment as it is done in Russia, and then comparing it with what was happening in OFB. So I will be referring to it at certain places to drive home the point. So as far as the restructuring per se is concerned, I think the decision has been taken. These 41 companies will be restructured into seven corporate entities, generally on the lines of what has happened in the defense PSUs. And the reason which the government has given is that possibly more autonomy will improve their competitiveness, their productivity, and maybe lead to better quality and deepen specialization and things like that. Now, as has been mentioned by the commencement speaker, that these have been in existence since 1775. So it is now virtually the 246th year. And they have been meeting most of the principal requirements of the armed forces, especially the army. But they came under criticism for quite some time, possibly last 2 decades. They have been under criticism because of time and cost overruns, because of the quality of products being produced. And I think late 90s was a time when the chairman OFB and his complete team should have taken note of this. And because that was the time when opportunities were available in Eastern Europe. And he should have taken note of it, and to remain competitive in this changing technological and economic environment, he should have gone in for large scale modernization, creating a futuristic product line, and investing in next generation competencies. A visit to most of their factories, indicates that the way the Soviet missed the Silicon Revolution, the OFB seems to have missed the ICT revolution, and they just have replicas of the Soviet era, huge, with huge estates, a lot of sheds, some of them unused, and with hardly any modernization. But anyway, these I think the other speaker will also cover. So this change should have happened at Calcutta, and simultaneously at the factories level, at the grassroots level, they also faltered. They did not absorb technologies. The transfer of technology was not absorbed properly. I've been witness to more than 500-600 people coming for the T90, for the Smirch, for the T90, TOT transfer. They were sent to almost all nook and corners of Russia. They stayed there in those factories, learnt on the job. They should have come back and just, absolutely copied that whole process in letter and spirit. And that is what was required. Actually, that was not done. If you see today, leave alone the T90, but other products which have come in earlier, even today, after 30 years, 20 years of manufacturing, there are very strong dependencies on Russia, as a result of which they do not have any control on cost and time overruns. I mean, take the case of a stabilizer. I mean, I remember the kind of negotiations we used to go on there for the costs, from $80,000 coming down to $60,000 to $50,000. So if you do not have control on vitals, then obviously you cannot guarantee both to the user the availability of the system on time as well as at the cost at which it was contracted. And what is more intriguing is that large number of platforms for which the TOT came in the late 80s or early 90s have done the same old configuration, much efficiencies. Even if you compare it with the original equipment, you will find that there are certain systems which are not there. Now, this kind of practice indicates, that it was a kind of a status quo approach. That okay, we are a captive customer base. Whatever we produce, they have to accept. And what is surprising is that accepting all these. I remember in 2003-4, the tanks were coming without the sights. But the problem came when this whole malaise spread to ammunition, and it started resulting in accidents. I was based at Suratgarh, and I remember most of the units come there for their firing, and the kind of accidents which used to take place. And that's the time when actually OFB should have then said, okay, now it's a wake-up call. Let's do something. But then a lot of time was lost in just passing on, the army making some allegations, the OFB trying to counter it, and things like that. So this is the history as to why all this has happened. And well, we all feel that it's a good step which has been taken. But what is important is that, it's just not going to happen simply because you have now created 7 DPSUs. Because my experience with the DPSUs which we have, the ones which are supporting the army, is that the situation there may be a little bit better, but otherwise it is nothing much to write home about. So this approach, if they just go, because this is what is my fear, that a typical bureaucratic approach is, okay, let's follow what the DPSUs are doing. So in that case, it may bring about a kind of an incremental transformation. Well, they still have some orders, so they will end up completing it. They may still get some orders by nomination in the next 4, 5 years, 6 years. But then at the end of 15 to 20 years, it will be a full stop. So therefore, I feel that if we want to craft out productive, efficient organizations out of this change, then has to be a strategic shift. There has to be a lot of thinking which has to be done now at the Department of Defense production level, because earlier possibly the OFD could have done it, but now that these are all going to be 7 separate verticals, so this job has to be done by the Department of Defense production, for which they are not adequately staffed. Now, I feel that if we say that the OFBs are being corporatized, then it is very important for the OFB to have a organization culture, and it's very difficult to ensure that the workforce aligns to a vision. So how do we do it? I feel, there is a ray of hope. Or if you look at BrahMos, both are also, again, a kind of DPSU, one directly under DRDO, the other under Department of Defense production. You do find that their performance is better. The Navy still trusts them. The armed forces still trust BrahMos. So why is it that? It is because I feel there is a firm belief in these organizations that they are not the tail. They are very much the cutting edge, because without reliable weapon systems, the armed forces cannot win wars. Because after all, they need mission capable systems to perform in battle. So if this belief is there that, look, we are the cutting edge, we are not a part of the tail, then I think the process of transformation will start, because this will lead to high morale at the workplace. We have seen this in our army-based workshops. I mean, the time when things were really hot at the LAC, you should have seen these boys. There were 55, 58-year-old technicians who were told that, look, you are having some kind of, comorbidities. Do not come. We will manage. But they said, no, I'll come. I have to retire, sir. आप मुझे 2 साल में तो retire होना है, अभी काम करने दो. This is what is workplace morale. And if we can achieve it with our civilians in the army-based workshops, if the same can be achieved by naval officers in the shipyards, and the same can be achieved in BrahMos, then I suppose this can also be achieved in the DPSUs, provided the leadership thinks about it. And I will recommend a collaborative and trusting, work culture at the OFPs, a collaborative work culture with the private sector, so that this business of trying to do everything myself, we put an end to it. And it is important that subsystem levels are handed over to the private sector to assemble, build up, and provide to the OFPs for integration. Similarly, a trusting work culture. The Navy trusts the products coming out from the shipyards. That is why repeatedly orders are placed. There are 46 ships of all various kinds which are on order. And there is somebody in the Navy who's doing this long distance planning. It's a good thing that the Navy is in a position to design its own weapon systems. Today, position to design a tank or a AD weapon system or an aircraft or a helicopter. But then this mutual relationship of trust should be built up, which was not there with the OFP. And of course, the most important thing for the new DPSUs will be to focus on the 3 important issues of people, processes, and technology. It is very important for them to create a pool of, technicians with next generation competencies. It is important for them to allow highly trained technicians from the armed forces, Army, Navy, Air Force, to join them post-retirement, because these guys have been trained abroad, and nobody can have a better systems view than these chaps. On the shop floor, when you are manufacturing systems, you have a siloed view of somebody's assembling the gearbox, so he has a view of that. Somebody's assembling the engine, he's got he is only restricted to that. These technicians who work in the armed forces have a complete systems view, and therefore it is very important to use their services at the final assembly stage, at the stage of testing and all, because they will come in very handy there, as well as support when the system gets deployed. Apart from that, when these people join them, they will bring with them the collectivist culture of teamwork and loyalty, which I find missing, with their civilian counterparts. And they can provide the moral compass for their juniors to pick up competencies and to excel. So I feel this is one very good way. You do find this in the shipyards. There are naval officers at top. There are retired naval officers who are at the deputy general manager level. There are a lot of technicians who have joined as in the ranks as craftsmen. So this is something which needs to be done. This was done by the Israeli industry also, because they had the advantage of a lot of ex-servicemen leaving the IDF every 2 years and coming back into the civil streams. And today, if you meet people from IAI, IMI, and Rafael and all, you do come across a lot of guys who have worked in the IDF, and today now they are in this business of manufacturing weapons. Next comes, of course, the process. And this is where I feel, the maximum damage was. It was done because There were frequent deviations in the manufacturing process, materials. There was lack of cleanliness at the shop floor. I mean, I visited the assembly line where the Arjuns were being assembled, and when I compare, or the T90s were being assembled, and when you compare it with what was being done in Russia, there was a world of difference. I mean, those people had much difficult conditions because for 6 months in the year, Nizhny Tagil was full of snow, but yet they kept their work areas absolutely spick and span. So the OFs have generally shown an inability to strictly, follow the process documentation. I feel that once the OEM has given you this kind of a literature, it's very important to follow it, and any deviation in that must be only after the explicit okay is given by the OEM. It should not be done at the local level, whatever be the constraints. It means delaying production for a year, do it, but do not give these, because you are dealing with weapon systems. You are dealing with systems that on which the national security depends, on which the life of people who are inside that complex depends. And last is, of course, technology. Now, if the leadership in the OFs had been technology savvy, we wouldn't have reached a stage where 20, 30 years down the line, you are making the weapon in the same obsolescent configuration. And I give you one example, a simple example. If around 2003-4, after the OF teams had visited Russia and they had been exposed to the T90 as well as to the upgraded T72, which was shown in 2002 at the expo at Nizhny Tagil, that T72 was virtually like a T90. So if they had come back and just said, okay, they offered to DGMF that, look, we will make the T72 missile capable. That time I remember DGMF also wanting to do that. He had even had a talk with me saying that this is something we should have in the T72s, and a lot of things moved. But if the OFB could have come on their own, and for them it was very easy to do it. And imagine this simple change of making of a capability enhancement in the T72 would have led to changes in the fire control system, onboard electronics, stab system, all the sites, and you would have had a T72 modernized at 1/3 the cost of a T90. But this was not done. So this was another opportunity which was missed out by OFB, simply because the leadership was not tech savvy and they did not keep themselves abreast with the things which were happening all around the world. So this culture of innovation to adapt foreign designs and to adapt foreign developments to Indian condition was also missing in the ordnance factories. So this is as far as the grassroots level working is concerned. Now coming to the Ministry of Defense, I feel that this transformative process has to be led by the Department of Defense Production. If they just leave these 7 entities as freewheeling devices, well, all I can say is that 5 to 7 years down the line, 3 of the verticals will not be there, because in any case, one vertical has got only one factory under it, one has got 2, and other one has got some 3, 4 of them. So this clothing, the optoelectronics, and the parachute, I see very little future for them. Coming to these 4 major entities, if a strategic direction is not given to them, then possibly I see them there for the next 15-20 years. They'll be there for the next 15-20 years, because the government has said that they will not change the service conditions of the 70,000 employees. This direction was not provided by the MOD. Had it been provided to these 41 OFs and 9 DPSUs, we would have been self-reliant like Israel, possibly 20 years back. But anyway, still, I think it's not too late. The ministry has to come out with a defense technology strategy and a defense industrial strategy, clearly giving out the general line of direction, identifying capability gaps in the Indian military industrial complex as such, be it civil, be it what is there with the government. And then decide as to what are the technologies that need to be developed here within India, what are the technologies which we need to acquire from abroad, what are the industrial capabilities we need to create here, and then follow this strategic plan. And I have given the example of Israel. This is how they did it. Israeli firms went out, purchased manufacturing rights. Today you find in East Europe, Italy, all these countries, there are a lot of technologies which are just available. It's a question of just moving out, getting them, acquiring them, and starting production here, and then looking at integrating these technologies into the existing systems or systems. You see the number of programs that have been rolled out. So these can be very easily used there. And it is because of this well-crafted plan by the Israeli government that today we have in Israel these entities like IMI, the Israeli Aircraft Industry, Rafael, with the government. And then in the private sector, there are a host of companies like Soltum, like Tadiran, and the list can go on. So I think this is very important that the ministry, in the typical bureaucratic manner, should not just say, okay, now we have created this and you are now on your own, so do as you want and you find ways to survive. The industry, the ministry has to strategize, and then only these DPSUs will flourish. And I sincerely hope that if this is done, then certainly the Make in India program can be turbocharged, and we will see a lot of good things happening in the defense manufacturing sector. So the final take, yes, I think the capability is there, because despite all this criticism, you cannot deny that today the OFs have a very rich cache of knowledge on weapon system engineering. It may not be 100%, but certainly they are a knowledge powerhouse, better than anybody else in the country, whether it is manufacture of guns, manufacture of rifles, ammunition, complex weapons, and the like. They all have massive real estates. They have reasonably okay infrastructure. It may not be very modern. They have a workforce. Some of them are very bright people, very skilled people. But they have some fatal vulnerabilities, which I have discussed. And therefore, you know, if a golfer has a fatal golf swing, he can keep doing whatever he wants, but he will mostly miss the fairways and keep landing up in the hazards. So it is time for them to perfect their golf swing. And if they do that, then there are two options available to them. If they do it well, they will follow the Israeli way. If they falter, then they have they will meet the fate of their cousin, Royal Ordnance Factories. We know what happened to them. So let's hope that they are able to get their act together. And finally, we find some good conglomerates emerging out of this whole experiment, possibly far superior than Israeli military industries. That's all I have. Thank you all very much.